We've been sold a lie, a subtle one, repeated so often it became truth, that if you work hard, rise high, win big, you will be happy. That success is the finish line, that applause will fill the silence inside you, that achievements will quiet your soul. But what if it doesn't? What if you hit every target, check every box, reach every peak, and the echo you expected never comes? You stand there, trophy in hand, surrounded by noise, and yet inside it's quiet, hollow, like applause without a melody. You wonder if anyone else feels this, if everyone else is just better at faking it. But you're not alone. More and more people are reaching the top and feeling like they lost something on the way up. Tony Robbins doesn't sugarcoat it. He says it plainly. Success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And Carl Jung, decades earlier, was already explaining why. Jung believed that most people live through masks, what he called the persona. It's the version of us designed to please the world, the confident handshake, the polished smile, the well-managed image. But behind that, there's another version, the self, the raw, unfiltered, whole identity. The part of you that doesn't care about status, only truth, and between them is the ego, the fragile I that tries to keep it all together, tries to chase validation, tries to be what everyone wants. When you live only from the persona, fueling the ego, you might win on the outside, but you lose touch with what's real on the inside. Jung warned, the persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself, as well as others, think one is. It's a costume, a clever disguise, but the longer you wear it, the more you forget who you are underneath. And eventually, the mask starts to crack, because no matter how many awards you win, how many titles you earn, if those victories are feeding the persona and not the self, you will feel it, that ache, that quiet whisper after the celebration dies down. The self doesn't want trophies, it wants alignment. Jung called the journey back to your real self-individuation, not becoming something new, becoming what you always were, beneath the noise, the masks, the striving. And here's the part that most people miss. The higher you climb wearing the wrong identity, the further you drift from who you are. You reach the top only to look around and realize this isn't your mountain. The world told you it would be worth it, the salary, the followers, the reputation. But Jung said it best. The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it. Even the grandest trophy means nothing if it doesn't speak to your soul. And if the ladder you climbed leaned against the wrong wall the whole time, getting to the top only makes the fall steeper. So if you're standing in that winner's circle, feeling strangely lost, that's not failure. That's yourself, waking up, tapping gently on the inside of your success and asking, is this who we really are? And if you listen, really listen, that question might be the first step towards something real. Because now you see the lie for what it is, and that changes everything. We live in a world obsessed with answers, how to get more, how to rise faster, how to win bigger. But maybe the more important question is one almost no one asks. Why do you want it? Why that career? Why that income? Why that life? Because here's the uncomfortable truth no one talks about. You can succeed in everything you've been told to pursue and still feel like something's missing. You can win and feel nothing. That's the contradiction millions are living right now. And Tony Robbins doesn't tiptoe around it. He says, success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure, not an inconvenience, not a disappointment, the ultimate failure. Because what's the point of winning if you feel empty the moment the cheering stops? Tony draws a sharp line between success and fulfillment. Success, he says, is a science. There are strategies, systems, action steps. You follow them, you win. But fulfillment, that's an art. What lights you up might bore someone else, and what satisfies their soul might drain yours. Fulfillment isn't universal, it's personal, intimate, deeply internal. You can't download it, you can't copy it, you can only discover it by listening. Tony tells the story of a billionaire friend who spent $87 million on a painting. To him, it was ecstasy. To Tony, it was just a red square. Fulfillment can't be bought. It can't be given. It has to resonate. And that's where people get lost. They chase goals handed to them by parents, schools, social media, culture. They climb a ladder built by someone else. And when they reach the top, it's not just lonely, it's wrong. That's what happened to Robin Williams. He wanted to make the world laugh, and he did. He wanted an Oscar and won it. He wanted admiration, legacy, family. He achieved all of it, and yet he ended his life. Because even when the scoreboard says victory, if your soul feels starved, that win can feel like death. Tony tells this story with pain in his voice, because he knew him, because we all did, and because it reveals something most of us are too scared to say out loud. You can have everything and feel nothing, because if you spent your life feeding the ego, serving the persona, and never stopping to ask what fulfills you, then no award, no title, no applause will ever be enough. Tony experienced it himself. He had the castle, the stage, the empire, but some mornings he still felt off, because success doesn't exempt you from emptiness. If anything, it exposes it. He realized the key wasn't more, it was deeper. Growth, giving, purpose. He began asking different questions. What am I becoming? Who am I helping? Why does this matter? Because fulfillment doesn't arrive at the finish line. It's built in the reasons you run. So before another year disappears into the checklist, take a breath. Think about your last big win. Did it make you feel full or just less empty? That's the moment, the turn, the crack in the mask where something real can start to shine through. Because there's something worse than failure. It's winning the wrong game. And if your ladder leads nowhere, the last thing you want is to reach the top faster. This isn't about walking away from ambition. It's about choosing a direction that actually matters. And that starts not by asking, what do I want to do? But by asking, who do I want to be? Because when you answer that honestly, success stops being the point and starts becoming the result. You chase the dream, you get the promotion, the car, the applause, the title. And for a moment, it feels like everything, but then it fades. And in its place, something quieter arrives. A restlessness, a strange, invisible hunger. You look around at all the things you once prayed for and wonder why none of them feel like enough. This isn't failure. This is something far more disorienting. You got everything you wanted, and you're still not full. There's a story you've heard before, but maybe never felt like this. King Midas, the man who wished that everything he touched would turn to gold. And the gods, amused, said yes. At first it was joy, tables, walls, fruit, clothes, all shining, all priceless. But then he touched his food, and it became inedible. He embraced his daughter, and she turned cold, rigid, lifeless. The gift he thought would make him a god turned his world into a graveyard. That story is more than a myth. It's a mirror, because every day people chase their version of gold. More money, more likes, more legacy, and sometimes they get it. But when they do, they discover what Midas learned too late, that not everything that glitters nourishes the soul. Carl Jung would have seen the lesson instantly, that when we chase what the world praises without listening to what the soul needs, we risk turning our entire lives into trophies we can't even hold. It's not just kings in stories, it's actors at the height of fame, feeling empty backstage. It's CEOs in mansions, lying awake, wondering why they can't sleep. It's everyday people on paper, successful, who quietly admit they're not okay. Jim Carrey said it straight. I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of to say, so they can see it's not the answer. And he wasn't joking, because the world will hand you a checklist, and when you complete it, if you ever do, you might realize it wasn't yours to begin with. Even the strongest crumble under that weight. Shaun White, Olympic legend, stood on the podium 3 times, gold around his neck, a nation behind him, and still he called it a crash. After every Olympics, he said, win or lose, I've felt a dramatic emptiness, because his whole life had been designed around that one moment, and once it passed, there was nothing left to chase. That's the hidden cost of achievement without meaning. The moment it's over, the silence can be deafening. But it's not just public figures, it's you, me, all of us. It's the person who got the degree and now feels aimless. The entrepreneur who exited their company and lost their identity. The parent who devoted everything to stability and wonders when they last felt alive. This isn't a tragedy, it's an invitation. Because buried inside that disappointment is the chance to ask the most important question. Did I climb the right mountain? Paulo Coelho told this story in The Alchemist. A boy travels across deserts, facing danger, loss, and love, chasing treasure beneath the Egyptian pyramids. And when he finally arrives, he discovers the treasure was buried back home beneath the very tree where he had his first dream. But he doesn't mourn the journey, because the treasure wasn't the point. The transformation was. The boy who returned was not the same boy who left. That's what fulfillment feels like. It's not just arriving, it's becoming. Even simple parables carry the same wisdom. A businessman watches a fisherman resting by the sea. He tells him to work harder, expand, make millions, so he can one day retire and enjoy peace. The fisherman smiles and says, "What do you think I'm doing now?" The joke isn't about laziness, it's about presence. It's about how easily we trade what's real for what's rewarded. And it's about the courage it takes to admit, maybe the life you were chasing wasn't yours, because you can touch gold, you can win, you can shine. But if, in the process, you turn what you love into something lifeless, you didn't succeed, you surrendered. So pause, look around. Ask yourself what you're chasing and why, because the danger isn't that you won't get it, it's that you will, and when you do, you'll be left standing in a palace of gold, wondering why you feel so alone. You get the thing, the title, the check, the ring, the key, and for a second, maybe a week, it feels like the missing piece. But then your brain does what it's wired to do. It normalizes it. It turns the extraordinary into ordinary. That's not a glitch. It's the system. It's called the hedonic treadmill. And you've been on it your whole life. You run, you reach, you celebrate. And then the feeling fades and the treadmill speeds up. So you run harder, you raise the stakes, you set bigger goals, you chase again, because the high didn't last. And maybe the next one will, but it won't, because it's not designed to. We are hardwired to adapt, to reset our baseline, and while that kept our ancestors alive, it now traps us in a loop of wanting without ever arriving. You tell yourself it's ambition, but what if it's just fear dressed up in productivity? Fear that stopping means falling behind. Fear that standing still means becoming invisible. But here's the irony, you can run as fast as you want and still go nowhere. Viktor Frankl called it the existential vacuum, the space where meaning should live but doesn't. He saw it after surviving the Holocaust, watching people with full freedom and no purpose. He said, "Ever more people today have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. And that is the most silent kind of suffering, not the chaos of a crisis, but the ache of a life that looks fine and it doesn't feel like anything." Frankl warned us, don't aim at success. The more you chase it, the more it slips away. It must ensue like a shadow when you live in alignment with something greater. But if you don't, if you ignore the hunger for meaning, the treadmill turns into a trap. That's when the breakdown comes, not always loudly, sometimes quietly. At midlife, in the dark, in the mirror, when everything you built starts to feel like someone else's dream. Carl Jung called this the turning point. He said life has two halves. The first is for building, status, identity, ego. The second is for discovering truth, depth, the self. But most of us try to stretch the first half too far. We keep chasing the same things, even when they've stopped feeding us. We keep performing, even when no one's watching. We keep pretending, even when we no longer believe it. And then something breaks, or someone walks away, or you wake up and the life you worked so hard for doesn't recognize you anymore. It's not a midlife crisis. It's a midlife conversation with your soul. It's the self saying, you've been loyal to the mask, now come home. That moment isn't the end, it's the beginning of freedom, because when you finally stop running long enough to ask, what do I actually want? Everything starts to change. And not in a dramatic movie montage kind of way, but in a quiet, grounding, deeply human way. You start choosing differently. You trade hustle for honesty, image for identity, noise for truth. And when you do, the treadmill stops. You're still moving, still growing. But this time it's towards something real. You're not chasing the next hit, you're becoming someone whole. That's the shift. And that's where fulfillment begins. Before there were algorithms, hustle culture, or personal brands, there were people asking the same question you're asking now. What makes a life worth living? And across centuries, across cultures, across philosophies, the answers echoed each other. They didn't point to fame or fortune or success by modern standards, they pointed inward. Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." That line wasn't written last year. It was written in ancient Rome by a man who watched his empire chase everything and still suffer. The Stoics knew that success is never dangerous until it owns you, that the real poverty is insatiable wanting, that the mind, once addicted to more, cannot recognize enough. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, but he still wrote to himself each night, reminding himself to stay grounded, to live with integrity, to remember that titles fade, and that peace comes not from power, but from purpose. "Stop arguing about what a good man should be," he said. "Be one." That isn't just a mantra, it's a mirror, because it asks the question success never will. Who are you when no one's watching? Viktor Frankl found that question in the darkest place on earth. He survived the Holocaust, and through it he discovered something startling, that even in unspeakable suffering, some people held on because they had a reason, something beyond themselves, someone they loved, a future they imagined, a purpose they believed in. Those who have a why to live, Frankl said, can bear almost anyhow. And then years later, he looked at the modern world and saw people with everything, comfort, choice, time, but no why, no compass, no direction, just noise. He called it the existential vacuum, that quiet, yawning space inside you that no achievement can fill, because it's not asking for rewards, it's asking for reasons. Frankl warned us not to chase success directly, because the more you aim at it, the more it recedes. Like happiness, it's not something you catch, it's something that arrives when you're living in alignment with what matters. He said success must ensue, not be pursued, but we forgot. And so we run blindly, endlessly, believing that speed is the solution, but it's not speed that saves you, it's direction. And that wisdom lives not only in psychology, but in the deepest teachings of the East. In Buddhism, they speak of the hungry ghost, a creature with a giant belly and a pinhole mouth, always ravenous, never satisfied. Sound familiar? In modern terms, we'd call it ambition, drive, high performance, scaling, but in spiritual terms, it's suffering. Because when you reach for things that cannot satisfy the soul, you will keep reaching forever. Buddhism doesn't say desire is wrong, it says attachment to outcomes is what binds you, that when your identity is fused with achievement, you suffer the moment results don't arrive, or worse, when they do, and you still feel nothing. The antidote isn't to stop moving, it's to move from presence, from clarity, from non-attachment. The Zen master said, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, meaning the tasks may stay the same. But you're different. The actions are no longer performative. They're purposeful. That's the shift. Joseph Campbell saw it too. He studied the great myths of humanity. And what he found was a pattern. The hero never begins in glory. They begin in crisis, in discomfort, in a world that doesn't quite fit. And then they hear a call, not to achieve, but to journey, to leave the ordinary world, to enter the unknown, to find a treasure that isn't gold, but growth. Campbell said, if the path before you is clear, you're probably on someone else's. And you know what? He was right, because most of us are walking roads paved by others, expectations, institutions, family scripts, cultural myths. We don't choose, we follow. And one day we wake up and wonder, whose life am I living? Campbell's answer, follow your bliss, not your fantasy, not your feed, your bliss. The quiet, often inconvenient pull of your deepest purpose. It won't always make sense, it won't always look successful, but it will feel like truth. And in a world obsessed with how things appear, there is nothing more rebellious than living from what's real. So maybe fulfillment isn't something you find at the end of a road. Maybe it's something you uncover when you finally leave the wrong one behind. Now we return to the question, not the one the world keeps asking, how do you win? But the one that echoes deeper. What fulfills you? Not what gets attention, not what buys respect, not what earns applause. What makes you feel real? Because the world is very good at helping you succeed and very bad at helping you feel whole. It gives you tools for productivity, but almost nothing for meaning. That's why people are winning on paper and quietly unraveling when they're alone. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. He called the journey individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating all the parts you left behind while chasing approval, the fears you buried, the dreams you silenced, the truths you ignored to be accepted. Individuation isn't a concept, it's a reckoning. It's the moment you realize that the mask no longer fit because the person underneath has outgrown it. Tony Robbins puts it simply, what you get will never make you happy. Who you become will. Fulfillment doesn't come from stacking achievements. It comes from alignment, when your choices match your values, when your actions reflect your purpose, when your outer life is an honest extension of your inner life. That's where peace lives. That's the fulfillment factor. And it's not something you chase, it's something you remember. You remember that your soul doesn't care about performance metrics, it cares about presence. You remember that success isn't a place, it's a practice. And when you start living from that space, something changes. You stop asking, am I ahead? You start asking, am I aligned? You stop chasing finish lines and start following your fire. You stop performing and start becoming, and that's when fulfillment arrives. Quiet, steady, certain, because you're no longer running toward it. You're living from it. So if this message stirred something in you, don't scroll past it. Send it to someone still running, still climbing, still wondering why it doesn't feel like enough. Not to impress them, to remind them that the most important work isn't becoming what the world wants, it's returning to who you are, that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure, but fulfillment, even without recognition, is freedom. And maybe now you finally see the life for what it was, not who the world taught you to be, not who you had to become, just you, finally you.